We're interviewing Mr. Louis C. Drapalski at Latham headquarters. It's August 8th, 2001. Michael Akey, interviewer. Wayne Clark, videographer. Mr. Drapalski, where were you born, sir?
In Cohoes.
Cohoes.
Cohoes, New York.
Okay. Went to school in Cohoes?
Yes. High school.
High school. How were things in Cohoes back then?
A little different from what they are now. There's no doubt about that.
Really?
I mean, more stores were open.
Uh-huh.
The whole atmosphere was different.
Uh-huh.
Right now, Cohoes is dead. You know. Let's
Well.
face it.
Now, you graduated from high school what year?
1939.
39. What did you do when you got out of high school?
Well, I joined the GE as an apprentice toolmaker.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked with the GE until I got into the Navy.
Okay. Do you remember where you were when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
In school.
You were in school?
Yeah, we had to go to night school when we were on the apprentice course.
Uh-huh.
And I can remember throwing my books out the window, figuring, well, I don't need these anymore. And then, of course...
So you thought you were going to go into the service
right
pretty
away,
quick?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when did you volunteered?
Yes, because I got an exemption with the GE, the fact that we were a war-producing
Okay.
facility, even though I was only an apprentice, apprentice. I got an exemption, and I had the exemption for maybe a year or so. What shamed me into going in was my younger cousin joined the Coast Guard, and they're kidding me about it, so I just volunteered
Okay.
in the Navy.
Why'd you pick the Navy?
I had a cousin, Ted Drapalski, from Herkimer, who was at Pearl Harbor at the time it was bombed.
Oh.
And he came home on leave and visited my folks.
Mm-hmm.
And said, if you ever have to go in the Navy, you'll have a dry bunk and good food, and you won't be in the muck and the mire that the Army and the Marines are in. So
Uh-huh.
I did.
Where did you do your basic training?
Sampson.
Samson. Tell me about Samson.
Sampson up in the
Finger Lakes.
Finger Lakes.
Yes.
That's what it was, not the Great Lakes, Finger Lakes. It was cold. We were up there kind of in the winter.
Okay.
And the only thing I remember about Sampson is it was cold, and we always had red cabbage for one meal or another.
You were in, what, wooden barracks?
Wooden barracks.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was, did you get out on Seneca Lake at all?
Only once on a drill with the big boats. But as I say, it was cold and wet and everything else, so we didn't spend too much time on the lake.
Uh-huh. You weren't thrilled with Samson?
Thrilled? I don't know. I heard it was better than the Great Lakes as far as a boot camp was, so...
Did you get into Geneva at all?
Once.
Once. What was that like?
Well, tell you the truth, we won a championship basketball tournament, and we got a one-night liberty in Geneva, but we had to wear our boots or our puttees,
Mm-hmm.
and of course they would service in a gin mill with those things on.
Oh, really?
I always elected to sit outside with a big pile of those boots, and while the rest of the guys, the team that I was on, went in and had beer. So
Now, why wouldn't they serve you with those on?
that's, for some reason or other, it was not an underage type of thing. It was just
It was a local thing?
local ordinance, I
Yeah.
imagine. I wasn't quite sure why. All I can remember is sitting out there with 5 or 6 pairs of boots. You know, these leather gadgets
Right.
strapped around.
Right. So after basic, where did you go?
The fact that I had a kind of a machinist background, they shipped me up to Boston.
Okay.
And we went to Wentworth Institute, which is a small college right there at Ebbets Field.
Mhm.
Not Ebbets Field, where the Boston ball players play.
That's not Fenway, is it?
Fenway Park.
Fenway
yeah.
Park.
In fact, it was right off the end of Fenway Park. We had to cut through Fenway Park to go into
Oh.
Wentworth Institute. And that's where I spent the next 16 weeks.
What were you studying there?
Well, we had different subjects, and most of it was machine shop stuff, which I already knew. In fact, I was an apprentice, so it was kind of an easy going. We did have a chance to work at the Watertown Arsenal for a few weeks at night, and they used to ship us up and ship us back there for a matter of 4 hours. That was the big machine shop there, because we had machine shop experience.
Right, right.
So that's where I spent that.
Did you like living in Boston?
Well, we're right there on Commonwealth Avenue, there right in the heart of Boston. And in fact, from the hotel, you can hear Fenway Park when the ball players were playing. So it was nice, you know.
Pretty good deal for a young guy from Cohoes.
Oh, especially a guy who never been out of Cohoes.
Really?
But the old Howard was over there on Mass Avenue, that was a strip joint, things like that. You know, it's different for
Part of your education.
a rookie.
Now, after that assignment, where did you go?
Well, what had happened at the assignment, I got a case of, what the heck was it? Well, whatever it was, I restricted from, and I had to go into the hospital for a week. Not yellow fever, I forget what the heck it was, scarlet fever.
Okay.
That was it. And I missed my graduating class. And I went back to finish my tour of duty at Boston. They wanted volunteers for submarine duty. So not even knowing where New London was, I looked it up on their map and I said, that's quite close to Albany. Because in Boston, we used to go home every weekend for Liberty. And I figured New London was fairly close, so I joined.
So that was your reason?
That was the only reason. It was close to home and it gave me another 16 weeks of getting home on leave.
You really didn't think about being in a submarine?
I didn't know what the heck it was all about until we first went aboard one.
What was that experience like?
Very unusual. The first thing they handed me was a bucket of tapered pegs, wooden pegs, and a mallet. And I didn't know what even say, well, what's that for? I went aboard and we took our training on OLR boats, submarines, and they were riveted. And if we dove, sometimes the rivets would pop out, and my job was to stick one of those dowels in a hole and pound it in with a mallet. And that was it.
Was that a little disconcerting?
It was a lot different from what I expected. So again, it was a lot better in poking the packing that the drive shafts went through with this great big iron hook. Keep that thing from sinking the boat.
What was training like for a submarine? Pretty rigorous?
There it was, but not until I really got into the big boats that it got to be rigorous when I had to qualify for my dolphins. But there, in fact, the kids still laugh at me. We used to get $1 for every dive we made. And sometimes we made 5 dives a day, so that was $5 extra that we made, you know. And, you know, you always smell diesel fuel and everything else. The engines were a lot smaller than one of the fleet boats were and everything else. And we got through that. And the funny part of it, the boat that I was on was being made in Portsmouth at the same time. And they never shipped me from New London to get onto the Pintado at Portsmouth. They shipped me across country, then they shipped me on a Dutch freighter out to Hawaii, and then when the Pintado came around, that's when I joined.
So that wouldn't qualify you as a plank owner, would it?
No plank owner. That was the way I missed it. I made every one of the runs the Pintado had,
Okay.
but not a plank owner.
Oh dear.
No.
So the R boats, they were they World War I? Or?
I imagine they were, because the
Diesel.
S boats were still being used in World War II.
Okay.
So they were considered a little more modern than the R boats.
Okay. Diesel?
Diesel.
Okay. So you're out in Hawaii and you meet up with your new ship.
Yeah.
What was it like going aboard for the first time?
It was, I didn't like, I was couple of days I was on the relief crew aboard a tender, and I didn't like that at all.
Mm-hmm.
So when I got the word that I was picked, they needed a fireman at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciated it. And that's why I remember one of our shipmates, Pappy Echols. He took me under his wing and showed me a different way. And the most important thing, he showed me how to use the head.
Now, why is that?
Because if you don't do it right, you get a face full of whatever's in the doggone septic tank. Or
Interesting.
very interesting. The 6 runs, I never got caught. But it's quite a thing.
Now, you were a fireman?
A fireman.
What were the duties?
Just an oiler. I used to stand watches with a motor Mac
Mm-hmm.
who was higher rated.
Mm-hmm.
And I read gauges and get down and do whatever the petty officers didn't want to do, let's face it.
Who was the skipper?
Bernard Clowrey, Captain Clowrey. Eventually he made Admiral, and he was the Admiral of the whole Pacific Fleet at one time. Bernard Clowrey, I don't know if you ever remember him or not.
Was he a good skipper?
Very good. The fact that he took us out and got us back, I'd say he was very good.
And the rest of the crew pretty good?
They, what wasn't good, we kind of filtered out over a period of time.
I guess if you're living in close quarters, that's very important,
That's
isn't it?
important, because we had a couple of them, they got rid of one, they got rid of even before the first run, and then the other one got rid of after the first patrol.
Mm-hmm.
It was very disheartening when you're on the battle phones back in the engine room to hear somebody sobbing and crying, and we're getting depth charge and not knowing what the hell was going on. It was very disheartening, believe me.
So what's it like living on a submarine? Daily life?
Tight packed, a lot of times boring,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times exciting, and most of the times you wanted to earn your dolphins, so you're either studying or reading,
Mm-hmm.
when you're not on watch, naturally.
Mm-hmm.
And again, there was 4 tables in the mess hall, and one table always had a poker game on it, 24 hours a day. You get off watch, you sit in, you go on watch, somebody else win.
Mm-hmm.
But it went on 24 hours a day, so consequently we ate mess on just 3 tables. So, you always smelled diesel engine. You never really got a chance to get a good shower.
Mm-hmm.
As I say, most of the time it was almost downright boring, just waiting for something to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, and then when it did, then you really got excited.
Now, you said one of your goals was earning your dolphins. What did that mean?
You had to know where every doggone one of the lines and the electrical cable went throughout the whole boat. And then you had to know how to load a torpedo, how to work on the engine, how to go back in the maneuvering room where they switch, the electrical switch over from diesel to battery, and you have to do. And you had to crawl around the bilges and everything to find out all these things. Now, I went out to New London one time, and I made the mistake of asking the kids out there, well, what kind of a boat do you qualify on? They looked at me and they laughed. They sit in an air-conditioned room on a computer with each one of the compartments in the screen in front of you, and with their little mouse, they could trail these little, lines and everything else throughout. And a lot different for
No crawling through bilges.
No, nothing. I mean, each compartment had its own 3-dimensional thing, and they qualified that way.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a little different from what we used to.
So the initial shakedown cruises went pretty well?
Most of the time, yeah, we had a few, few problems. like the sea valves leaking and everything else, because they curled the gasket in underneath there. After we took over from the relief crew, we had to go on a shakedown, and sometimes that got pretty exciting because things wouldn't always work out the way we thought they were going to.
Did you like life on the submarine?
To me, I treated it as an adventure because it was different for me.
Mm-hmm.
The farthest I ever went from my hometown was down to see the Yankees play down in New York, 150 miles.
Mm-hmm.
And that might have been maybe a half a dozen times in my lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
So, to me, it was an adventure, you know. I just took it.
Being a submariner, did you feel that you were different than the rest of the Navy?
Yeah, we always had that cocky attitude, you know, that little bit of different from the, you know, the topside officers and the enlisted crew.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was that.
What was your first combat cruise?
It was an exciting one. In fact, I got a write-up on that thing. If you ever want to read an exciting book, read the one about from our executive officer, Mendenhall, wrote one, the Submarine Diary.
Oh.
But first patrol was in the Mariannas, south of Formosa.
Mm-hmm.
I'm reading that. We had Captain Blair, who was the commandeer of the fleet, the Wolfpack that we were on, and he himself was a character in itself, believe me. We came across a contact of 3 ships and 3 escorts. Let's see, we fired 6 torpedoes, scoring 5 hits on a freighter and 1 on another ship. And that was the first one.
Do you remember that mission?
Well, I'll tell you, being back in the engine room, this is another difference that I found. Reading that book that Mendenhall was, he was executive officer,
Mm-hmm.
he was up in the control room. We were always back in the engine room. Now, we really didn't know what was going on, except for the battle phones, or the fact that when the torpedo left the boat, we kind of felt it,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'd count 40 seconds. Now, if we heard an explosion before 40 seconds, we knew we got a hit.
Mm-hmm.
And if there was no explosion before 40 seconds, we knew we missed it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they were programmed to self-destruct, you know,
Okay.
after if we missed. So there was a lot of things that I wasn't aware of until I read that book of Mendenhall's and then got it from his perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of an eye-opener.
Now, you're back in the engine room, doing your job. You know something's going on.
Right.
How does it, how do you feel about not really knowing what's happening? Did you think about it, or were you just too involved in doing your job?
Well, you're kind of waiting for word, because if we got a torpedo hit, it kind of went on the loudspeaker and everybody cheered and all that stuff. But most of the time we did that when we were submerged.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the time we were just in a sweat, silent running,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and all that stuff. And to tell the truth, I think I was really too dumb to be afraid. Really afraid.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of wondered what was going on, but not where you really had to be afraid of to the point where you couldn't do anything.
Now, what happened the first time you were at the sharp end of things when say the escorts came after you? Then the atmosphere must change a little bit.
That's when the depth charges started.
Right.
That's when he was a first-class cook, who was crying, and the Dutch charges would hit. He was sobbing, and we're sitting back in there. What the heck's going on? You could feel the depth charges.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't know how close they were, what they were hitting.
Mm-hmm.
So you were kind of a little fearful then,
Mm-hmm.
you know, as far as what the heck is going on. But again, he always had faith in the captain. And one thing that he used to do is, and I never realized that he did it until I read the book, was he used to follow his own torpedoes in. In other words, when the escorts saw the torpedo go, you know, they'd kind of swing around the outer perimeter. Well, we used to go in toward the direction the torpedoes were, and whoever was on the outboard side of that got the depth charges. Of course, we worked with other submarines at times. So they got the depth charges, and we kind of got away, you know, the other way. So it's different.
The captain maintained pretty good esprit de corps in the sub?
Yeah, he, reading the book, there was a problem between the executive officer and the doggone captain, which we never were aware of. Let's face it, they were both top-notch officers, and we had very little contact with them. The only time we were up in the control room when we were happened to be on watch at the surface, and then we got the signal to dive, we always had a station to go to. Now mine was either the bow or the stern planes, or the water manifold, either one of the three. So whatever side of the watch you were on, you had either the bow planes, the stern planes, or the trim manifold. So there was very few times I was up in the control room with the officers, except for that period of time. So I didn't, you know, really realize there was animosity going on between the two guys reading this book.
But they were both professionals and kept it to themselves.
Yeah, they kept it going, but of course, as I said, we didn't realize it. Of course, Mendenhall, he wrote the book, I mean, it was his log.
Right.
And he's the one that, you know, had some doubts about the captain and the fact that he wouldn't allow, the captain wouldn't allow him to do his job. He always kind of interfered. And why don't we do it this way? Never mind the way you used to do it on the Sculpin or anything else, which was another sub. That type of thing. I never was aware of that.
Did ever cross the equator?
Yes. They went through the ritual.
What was that like?
You know, it was, when you were in close cramped quarters, you didn't have too much. We got paddled, and we had guys dress up in Neptune and, you know, the whole thing. And then after we went through, we got a scroll saying that we went through and everything else. You know.
Still have your scroll?
I think so, yeah. I got quite a bit of it. A lot of photographs and a lot of mementos I did lose, but...
So about how many combat missions were you on?
6 patrols.
6 patrols?
Yeah. And as I say, on our 5th patrol, we were on what they call rescue duty, and we did pick up the crew of the B-29 that was shot down. So that in itself is kind of an unusual event.
Well, how to explain how that all came about?
Well, we were on patrol, we were on the surface, and if you read the doggone passage here, which is very patrol, just south of Hanshu, the submarine was on lifeguard duty. She was sighted by a badly damaged B-29. After crossing the submarine's bow at 2,000 feet, 1 mile ahead, 12 parachutes blossomed out as the plane started down, turned to the right, and exploded. 45 minutes later, the top men were aboard the Pintado. After this, we dropped them off at Guam, but that was very interesting and very nerve-wracking because the guys, when they knew they were going to be saved, were really hard to get a hold of because they had the doggone life rafts bunched between their legs. They were riding them like horses, you know.
Okay.
They had the heavy flight jackets on. Half of them had the torpedo or the parachute floating around. We had to cut that loose. And of course, they hung on to their parachute. If you took that parachute ring away from them, you were dead. But we had to reach way out, get out way on the fuel tanks, you had two guys holding the back of your belt, and you're reaching out trying to snag these guys, and then pull them aboard. And of course, they were heavy with the wet
Right.
suits and everything else. And they were whooping around and playing around. And
They're just happy to be alive.
they were happy to be alive. We got them down, after we got done, we went down to the engine room to get the heck out of that area. And we had the guys stripped down and hung their clothes over the hot engines to dry up. And of course, we gave them dry dungarees and shirts and whatever they needed. And I can remember we had a toolbox that was upholstered, and two of the guys were sitting there, and they looked kind of, well, they looked very concerned. And I thought maybe something was wrong with them, you know. So after we dove, I went over to one of them, and I said, "What's the matter?" And he looked at me, he says, "When are we going to dive?" Well, at that time, we were down probably a good 10 or 15 minutes. And I said, "We already did dive." And I said, "You know, when we shut the engines off, that's when we dove." I said, so they kind of looked around. It was quite an experience for them.
They were expecting something to happen.
They were expecting something different. I don't know. They were really worried about diving. So about 3 months later, we hit Guam again, and we got an invitation from that crew to have dinner with them, and then they took us up for a joyride up in 3 B-29s to circle the doggone the base up at Guam there, and that was quite a thrill.
That must have been fun.
They changed the name of their city of Galveston, their plane, to the Pintado. So they named their new plane after our boat.
That was
So
very nice.
That was something.
Did you ever meet any of those guys after the war?
No, I got their names finally on the internet, or my son did, and I never did. In fact, I asked some of the other guys that I knew were in the Air Force and everything if they knew them, and you know, they knew the group, but they didn't know any of the guys.
Now, was it your ship that won the Presidential Unit Citation?
Yeah, the shipping.
Oh, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that ship did, but then there was individual, I noticed there were individual gold stars and bronze medals that were awarded to different guys according to the Division of Naval History section in the department, which they sent this to me. We got 5 battle stars, and there was individual Navy crosses, silver stars, and bronze stars given to different individuals for different things.
Now, you note once that you had a rather unusual duty out in the middle of the night.
Well, being in what they call a black gang, which is the machine shop gang, my job was we ran out of fuel. We had to convert the fuel tanks to ballast tanks, which meant changing the flanges on top to put a vent in or whatever they did. So we had to do it at night when we were surfaced, and that means the fuel tanks were about 2/3 of the way in the after part of the wedge go. So we get out through the conning tower hatch and kind of crawl 2/3 of the length of the boat in the dark, and then unscrew the doggone wooden decking that we had there and get down on top of the fuel tanks. And there were 6 nuts on those doggone flanges, round flanges, probably about 1 foot in diameter, that we had to unscrew, take that flange off, put another one on, tighten the bolts up, and then bring everything back, including all your tools, because we had the tools strapped to our waist. Because in the beginning, we were all thumbs, so we'd be dropping tools and everything else. And so this way, 2 or 3 times doing that, we got smart. And then we'd always get that, remember, if we have to dive, we're going to leave you out there.
How did you feel when you heard that?
That's it. We heard it every time we went out. I don't know whether they would or not.
Must have been a little unsettling.
Well, you know, we did leave one guy up that we recovered, the bosun's mate. If you read the book, you'll find out he was there. And when we did surface, he was sitting on top of the periscope wells, cussing like mad because
Where was he?
he was topside when we dove, but for some reason or other, the officer of the deck closed the hatch and didn't count the guys going down, so he was left topside. And
So you just remained below, just below surface.
we just ran awash almost all the way, but
Okay, enough for him to hold on.
yeah, I remember that. He cussed like a savage. And one guy who was a bosun's mate striker was always making mistakes. We lost him. We dove and never realized that he was left topside. Now what happens, he just freezes when he hears the dive alarm go off.
Oh,
I know the feeling because the first time I froze and had to get wrapped on the doggone fingers with a binocular case,
really?
let go and get under, but it wasn't an emergency
Mm-hmm.
crash dive or anything.
Now, was he the only
He was
casualty?
The only one. We surfaced as soon as we realized that he was left, and we never did find him. Of course, I think the section of the boat just kind of threw him way out. But he was the only casualty. We had one other where one of the officers, I guess, shot through both cheeks of the ass when we got strafed by a plane. And that was, I think, the only other casualty. It was a ricochet that went through both the soft part of his butt. So,
Did he have a hard time living that down?
well, he did, but the one that had the hard time living there happened to be in the head. At the time, we were getting depth charged, and then the heads, we had a box of flashlights, emergency flashlights, and we just hooked over a screw in the side of the bulkhead. And evidently, the jarring of the depth charges, the box fell off and hit his little toe. And of course, he reported it to the pharmacist mate. And the pharmacist mate reported it, and come to find out that he got hurt during action. So he got the Purple Heart. And what ticked us off was we had to stand at attention while he got a Purple Heart for that. And he was really goofing off in the head, in my estimation. So, no, that was, I'd say, the only casualty that I could remember.
So the ship did pretty well.
Yeah, we got banged up quite a bit. We had to come back twice for repairs, and once we had a very noisy screw that kept us from going out. And yeah, the ship did pretty well, I think.
Now, how did the ship get banged up?
Depth charges.
Depth charges?
Yeah.
Okay. So you had 6 combat missions, cruises. Total tonnage, total ship sunk was, do you remember how many?
It was well over 100,000. I think that's the reason why we got the unit citation.
Your experiences were pretty positive aboard
Oh yeah,
Pintado?
mine was, because as I said, everything to me was different. And to me, it was an adventure, let's face it. It was something that kid from Cohoes, who knows, sitting out there in the Pacific Ocean, the yellow South China Seas, the Yellow Sea, and we were at the Subic Bay there when the Japanese fleet came through, and
Really?
you know, we caught them out there. Not the first time when they bombed Pearl Harbor, but the second time when we were going to engage them in a naval battle.
Between patrols, where were you generally based?
Well, normally go on 2 weeks or a month rest period, it all depends on where we were. We hit Pearl Harbor twice, stayed at the Royal Hawaiian Hotel, which was very exclusive. And that to me was a big thrill because I was an avid reader when I was younger, and I can remember Charlie Chan books where they had that setting, and
And you actually got to stay there?
and I got to stay there, and I could see Diamond Head and all the other parts that he used to work with. So yeah, I was quite excited.
So you had some pretty good liberties?
Yeah, we had the liberties, 2 liberties in Australia, one on one side of the coast and one on the other side. And one in Fremantle, which was also, and we had one in New Zealand. And the one I remembered worse, and when we stayed away from being in a big town because there was no fun. So this one time we were up in a gin mill, and the chief of the boat came over and he says, "How would you like to take a trip?" And of course we were on a 2-week rest period, and things were not that great in the big towns. So what had happened is he met a woman in a bar who owned a horse ranch up in the ridge, which is the mountains up there in Australia. And he rounded 6 of us up to spend about, anywhere from, I think it was 8 to 10 days up at her ranch. And he picked the 6 guys that he thought would do her a lot of good. A radio man to fix our radio because they didn't have electricity up in there. I worked on a diesel engine which produced all the electricity on the ranch. And then we had Gurske, who was a forest, from Maine. He was built like he dug the fence posts and everything. So he picked us. And then, of course, he was from Wyoming or Montana. He broke horses for her. So all in all, we had an enjoyable 8 to 10 days, believe me. Living,
But you got some work done?
She got some work done, and we enjoyed it. In fact, I was there for 2 days before I realized that the cook, 3 minutes, that quit.
Well, no. We're going to change tapes.
Oh.
Marines cook was a woman?
No.
Oh, no. Oh, the woman
This
at
is
the
woman at
at the camp.
She had a regular ranch up there, a working
Okay.
ranch up there in the mountains. So we
Uh-huh.
slept in a bunkhouse. Eric Bailey, who's the chief, slept in the big house, I guess, with her. Talk about innocent kids. We didn't realize anything was going on. But that was one of the ones that I remember, one of the real rest periods that I remember. Well, I remember the one at the Royal Hawaiian Hotel in the beer garden, all that other stuff. But, all the rest of it was, mediocre, gym mill stuff and trying to pick up girls and stuff like that.
Were the Australians pretty friendly people?
Very friendly. They hated the Limeys, let's
Right.
face it, the English. Oh, they hated everything about the Limeys. I'm telling you, they never did get along together. But with us, they loved. They loved our cigarettes. The girls loved our cashmere bouquet soap because the soap they had is unbelievable. Because we were warned, once we hit Australia, to take a supply of toilet paper and soap. Because the toilet paper was atrocious, I'm telling you. It was like sandpaper. And the soap was no more than, I think, lye. So I can remember getting a case of cashmere bouquet soap, and we never had any shortages of women, I'll tell you.
Well, the bar of soap would go a long way in
Bar
Australia.
soap, yeah. Same thing with the, chocolate candy bars with the kids, and the girls are up to go. And of course, they were all anxious to meet up with the American sailors, and go back to the States, as they called it. we had a third-class cook that had a racket. He'd go to ship service and he'd buy a bunch of cheap diamond rings, probably $10 or so a part, no tax or
Right.
anything. He'd meet a girl, in the first couple of days, he'd become engaged, you know, in parentheses. And of course, he had, you know, a companion for the 2 weeks that we were there. And of course, you know, yeah, I'll send for you, and we hit the States and everything, and for God's sake, he was a great one for that.
That never caught up with him?
Yeah, it did.
Do you remember your last cruise?
The last crew was, actually, we were out in the middle of the Pacific when we heard that the war was over.
Really?
And that's when you had to be careful, because we didn't realize whether the Japs were aware of the fact that the war was over or not. So, yeah, I can remember cheering and everything and being out there in the middle of the Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, coming back through Pearl Harbor and then coming back to the States.
So where did you end up in the States?
Out at, let's see, the West Coast, there was, what was the name of that town? How about that? You're talking about a, anyway, it was south of San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
Not Treasure Island. Yeah, Treasure Island. That was where we came back in.
Okay. And is that where you left the ship?
Yeah, that's where we had to put her out of commission and put her what they call a red lead row. We had to spin all the cocoons over the guns and all that stuff, so it took us another 2 or 3 months to get her in what we call red leaded, you know.
So you decommissioned the ship?
I decommissioned her,
Oh.
yeah, but I never put her in a commission. As I
Okay.
said, I never understand why, when we were within a stone's throw of one another back in there, and they shipped me 6,000 miles to catch a darn thing. But
So how'd you feel leaving it for the last time?
kind of happy in a way that it got on with my life. But what I did, in order to get discharged out on the West Coast, you had to have a job. So I went down to the San Diego oil fields, and I told them I was an expert diesel engine operator, which was neither here nor there. And anyway, I got the necessary paperwork from them after I worked a week to come back and get my discharge on the West Coast. And then I took 2 months to hitchhike cross country. I remember it was in March. I didn't feel like hitting the East Coast in the winter, so I kind of went down through the southern part of the country and up and took my time hitchhiking.
Really? That must have been an adventure.
It was very well. I met a guy that was a Japanese war prisoner. He was driving a 39 Buick, I can remember that, and he had very poor eyesight because the Japanese, in order to torment him, would rub tobacco into his eyes, and he had very bad eyes, and his night driving was atrocious, and I realized that as soon as I got in the car. So the fact that he didn't know me too well, I mean, you know, when I offered to drive for him, he didn't let me until he got really tired. Well, what he was going to Texas to visit his parents before he hit Vets Hospital out there in South Carolina. And of course, I stayed with him all the way through. So that was another interesting adventure. So I drove him out there, and I stayed out there for about a week, settling him down and seeing if he didn't need, you know, getting rid of the car and everything else. So that was another adventure I had before I got home. Then I hitchhiked up the East Coast, and by that time it was over the winter. But being down there in the tropics, your blood kind of thinned out, and we didn't like the cold weather that.
So you didn't come home to any parade or,
No,
you know,
just back home to my mother and sisters, and when my job, you know,
yeah.
they kept that open for 90 days for me.
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
And you went back to work?
Yeah, finished my apprentice training course and then got transferred over to the North Atomic Power Laboratories again.
Mm-hmm.
We were instrumental in building the reactors that went to the future subs.
Oh.
That just happened to be coincidental because I was a tool maker, so they didn't care one way or another. But we made we're very instrumental in making the sodium reactor that went into the first Seawolf, which was a very different type of reactor.
Mm-hmm.
That was the one that Rickover was that was his baby all the way through.
So you were at Knowles pretty much at the beginning?
Yeah, actually at the beginning, because we worked at Peak Street while the Knolls were being built.
Oh.
And Peak Street was just a kind of a hold area until the main laboratory was built. So yeah, I'd say right from the beginning.
Did you get to see Rickover at all up there?
Oh yeah.
What's he like?
He's a little guy. Remind us of Captain Blair that was our candidate. He was a little guy and very much a pain in the ass, you might say, because he'd come in at 2 o'clock in the morning or anything else and expect the greeting party and everything to be there and everything. I can remember I was in a machine shop one time and he came up and kiddingly I said, what we're supposed to do, kneel, genuflex or what, and I didn't realize he was standing right behind me when I said it to another fellow there.
Are you still...
Blair was like that. Blair was a little guy. He was part Indian. He used to have a very immaculate set of khakis with high socks and, of course, the sandals. He had a crazy hat on. I don't know what kind it was. Always smoked a cigar, whether his smoking lip was out or not. And I can remember anytime he wanted to talk to you, he'd always be one step up on the ladder. He'd never be in a position where he'd have to look up at you. And he was short. He was like Rickover, a little heavier built, but Rickover was kind of slight. I can remember coming off a crash dive one time, and he wasn't moving fast enough. And of course, we didn't come down on the ladder. You slid down along the sides, and he was below me. And I kind of kicked him all the way down and knocked the cigar out of his mouth. But I had to get to either the bow or the stern planes. That was my doggone diving station, so I couldn't take the time to be apologetic, It was just one of those things. But it says it brings back memories. Like you feel like you're 19 or 20 again.
Sure, sure.
In fact, in a couple of weeks, I'm going down to the Union, the first one in 55 years.
Good for you.
On Pintado.
Where's that going to be held?
St. Louis.
St. Louis. Well, that should be fun.
Yeah. Yeah, my son was kind of responsible when I got this book from Mendenhall. He got on a computer and he traced Mendenhall's address down, wrote to him and told him that my father was on your sub and all that stuff. So he in turn sent my name to the secretary of the Pintado group. It was a group that they started back in the 50s to keep the guys together. And he in turn, the secretary called me.
Oh, that was nice.
That's how we got to the point where I knew there was a reunion going on in St. Louis.
Oh, great.
So it was exciting. It kind of brings it back in years, believe me.
Are there any other stories you can think of? Or?
Well, there's a lot of them, because everything that happened was certainly new to me.
Sure.
I don't care what it was. Who'd ever dreamt that I'd be out in the middle pulling guys out of the Pacific Ocean and saving 12 lives. There's one of us.
Right.
Not me alone, but I had my, hands on a couple of the guys anyway, pulling them in, so it was something. Yeah, a lot of stories. Of course, as I said, a lot of it was just boring. And you're putting in time, either studying or reading or playing cards or... I can't think of too much.
Okay. Do you have any general thoughts or comments on your military career as you look back at it?
Well, at the end, they wanted me to re-enlist, and I said no. I had enough then, so they just, they could have had me sign over for some peacetime duty, and I wasn't ready for that. And they asked if you had a son, would you let him join the Navy? Yeah, it's the same indication as this. And yet my daughter has, my grandson's 20 years old, and she said after reading the book and going out to the museum in New London and coming aboard a realistic World War II sub and seeing the way we lived and slept, and she says, I can't picture her son and her son out into something like this.
Right.
And yet, to me, he's more sophisticated than I was. They know the computer now, they drive cars and everything else. They're a lot different back in the 40s, believe me.
So, well, thank you very much, sir.
Well, I appreciated this because I certainly relived the time, felt as you say. I felt like I was 20 again. So.
Well, it was a great story.
But if you really want to, read a good book about it, read that Submarine Diary by Denningham.
Okay.
Will give you another insight, because he was on the Sculpin as well as the Pintado.
Okay.
And of course the Sculpin was the sister ship of the Squalus, which if you remember sinking back in '39.
Right.
And in fact, Danny Persico, one of the guys that were
just passed away.
Yeah, he was a member of our chapter
up
there at Clifton Park.
Well, unfortunately, we never got a chance to interview him.
Well, no, really too bad because his wife was really living in the limelight. She enjoys everything. But if you really want a copy of this for any reason at all, I got an extra copy of it.
We'd love to have it.
And they'll give you more of a...
Wonderful.
It was just a copy that we got from the Navy Department.
Is that an extra?
That was different. That was part of a magazine item that headed, does anyone know this man? And it was a shipmate of mine. California, was in a nursing home, lost a leg due to sugar diabetes or some doggone thing or other, and was kind of a little out of his mind in the sense that he had dementia or something. And his neighbor never realized who his neighbor was until he really got to know him. And then he realized who it was. It was this Scotty Alexander, who I used to stand my 6 watches with. A very, very first class gentleman.
Amazing.
And he himself had a fishing boat out of California there, and he was a very good mechanic as far as diesel engines go.
Well, I've got a little paperwork. This is our